Good morning, evening, afternoon, or whatever time of day it is when you're watching this. Viva Fry, another interview that we're going to be doing with someone who you may not have met, although if you've been around the channel for long enough, you have met him before. Maxime Bernier, the leader of the People's Party of Canada, the PPC. Before I bring in Maxime, full disclosure, you probably all already know this. I like Maxime. I ran for the People's Party of Canada, and I actually got to know Maxime before deciding to run for the People's Party of Canada in 2021. That was at a time when I said I was going to run for the country before I ran from the country, because the country seems to be on a downward spiral to a black hole of communism, statism, tyranny, whatever you want to call it. And as bad as it was in 2021, it seems to have only gotten worse. Maxime is a man. He's one of the few politicians I trust. He's someone I like, so you can interpret this entire interview with my own bias in mind. Starting off by saying I didn't always know Maxime, and I only got to trust him after having had very open discussions with him. You can go back and watch the first of the interviews I ever did with Maxime, where we talked about everything. And I'm going to bring up a few of the things in this interview because some of you might be meeting him for the first time. So without further ado, I shall be bringing in the man of the hour, maybe the man of the hour and a half. And if we go 2 hours, the man of the 2 hours, Maxime Bernier. Maxime, sir, it's been a while since we've seen each other. It's good to see you again. How goes the battle?
Good to see you, David. I'm very pleased to be with you. It's going well. As you may know, we may have an election called as soon as Sunday in Canada. So I'm ready for it, and we'll see what will happen.
Well, now people know you're actually in Florida at this time, but we couldn't get something to do it in person, but we'll meet up sooner than later in person. But the talk of the election, I mean, we're going to actually just back it up all the way because some people might be meeting you for the first time, and just tell them who you are, what your experience is, and how you got to start the People's Party of Canada, because it's a new party. Many people might not be aware of it, and many people might still be under some misapprehensions about what the party is, what it represents, and what it stands for.
Yes, thank you for asking, David. First, I must say that, I did work in the private sector, in the financial sector in Montreal for 19 years in the banking industry. And in 2006, I decided to jump into politics with Stephen Harper, and I was a candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada. I was elected the first time in 2006. I was industry minister, foreign affairs minister, and I resigned, and we may have a discussion about that later. And but after that, I worked with Stephen Harper. And when Stephen Harper didn't win the election in 2015, we had a leadership contest in Canada for the Conservative Party of Canada. I was one of the 12 candidates, and I didn't win with 49% of the vote. Andrew Scheer, 2017, was the candidate elected, the new leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And I tried to work with him for 15 months and pushing our ideas because, the platform, the real conservative values that I was fighting for was very popular with the membership of the Conservative Party of Canada. And I wanted him to take some ideas and put that in his platform for the general election in 2019. And so 15 months later, and I had a very good private discussion with Andrew Scheer. And he told me, Maxime, yes, your ideas were very popular with the membership of the Conservative Party of Canada, but they are not popular with the general population. And I won't take any of your ideas for the next platform of the Conservative Party for the election in 2019. So that's why I resigned, and I said, this party, the Conservative Party of Canada, is morally and intellectually corrupt. And they are just conservative in name only. They don't have the courage to fight, sorry, for real conservative ideas. And in 2018, we created the People's Party of Canada. And so, after 6 years, we are there fighting for real values, free markets, and fighting for, doing that actually cultural war in Canada for a smarter government and more freedom. And now, in a couple of days, the election will be called in Canada, and that will be our third election.
I've got to back it up all the way to the beginning before we get into maybe explaining the internal politics of Canadian politics for Americans who might be watching this. You are French Canadian, Maxime. Were you born in La Beauce?
Yes, yes. It's a city in about 1 hour by car south of Quebec City. And I did work in Montreal. I studied in Ottawa. And yes, I'm a French Canadian. You can hear that with my accent.
Well, and where were your parents? Like, how many generations in Quebec is your family?
Ah, with a lot many regeneration. If you look at my ancestor tree, 300 years ago.
It's amazing. And La Beauce, for those who don't understand, it's a small town south of Quebec. So it's almost how far from the border of Maine would it be?
Yeah, that's the border of Maine. Half an hour. The biggest city, Saint George de Beauce, half an hour from the state of Maine. So yeah, and there's a lot. And actually, I must say that in Beauce, it's the most entrepreneurial region in Quebec. There's a lot of entrepreneurs, and 65% of the economy over there is exporting to the US. So the relationship within Bose and New England and US is very strong. And so they are exporting a lot of products there.
We're definitely going to touch on the tariffs in a bit as well. Just before I forget, though, what are they? What's the primary export or among the leading exports from Beauce to America? Is it? I want to say beer, but is that wrong?
No, steel. It's a big industry also, manufacturing. Goods. But the big one is steel
Okay. Well, I was wrong. In fact, now that I say it, I don't know where. I don't even know if
and
Uni
maple
Blue.
syrup and maple syrup.
The Canada's got the cartel of the maple syrup
Yeah.
industry. What did your folks do growing up?
Yeah, my dad was, a radio man. He did start the radio station in Beauce in 1953. He was very well known in Beauce, and in 1984, he decided to jump into politics with Brian Mulroney. So he was elected with Brian Mulroney in 1984, re-elected in 1988, and in 1993, re-elected as an independent. And he decided after that, and he was an ambassador for Canada in Haiti. Yeah, when I decided to jump into politics in both, I was living in Montreal. But I decided to go back in both, and I was elected. I must say, in 2006, people didn't know me personally, but they knew my dad, and they voted for my last name. But in 2008, they voted for me. So yeah, that's a great riding entrepreneurship, and people don't like a big fat government. So it's in line with my political philosophy.
And for anybody who's going to Google this, it's Saint Georges de Beauce. It's George with an S at the end, and Beauce is Beauce. Just in case you want to look it up,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. When I studied in Quebec City, every now and again we'd end up in La Beauce, but for outdoor reasons, it was just beautiful. Okay, now we might have to get into explaining the nuances of Canadian politics. You run in 2006. What was the scandal at the time, or why did you resign at the time? I remember touching on this a bit the first interview, but refresh the memories, or at least advise those who don't know what happened back in 2006.
Yeah, 2006, January, first time elected, first time minister, industry minister, a big portfolio, very successful. I did a deregulation in the telecom industry. That was, I wanted to have fewer regulations, and we did that, and very successful one. And after that, I had a promotion to be foreign affairs minister. Everything was going very well, but I've met a lady, and she had some tie with bankers, not bankers, bikers. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, bikers, and actually after a meeting, I had a meeting in Bucharest, Romania, a NATO meeting at that time in 2008. And I had briefing before that meeting, so I went to the meeting. I deliver, the position of Canada for that meeting, and after that, I came back in Montreal. I went to see my girlfriend at that time, and I forgot classified confidential documents. And a couple of weeks after that, I said, our relationship will end. She was not so happy with that, and she used the document, and she went public about that, and that was a big scandal. So I didn't know her past, and now all the journalists did their job at that time. They did their job,
Well,
and they did a lot
Maxime,
of research.
they always do their job when it's the opposition. They never do the job when it's their funders. But what was I remember there was a catch about the documents themselves, that they may or may not have actually been as confidential as the media was portraying it at the time.
Yeah, no, it was not confidential at that time because the documents, were the preparation for me at the meeting, and I said that after that at the meeting in Bucharest, all that was public, so the documents were not confidential anymore because I did a press conference, and so that was briefing to that press conference. And anyway, so she used that. She went to the media, and we had a precedent in Canada where a minister forgot, confidential document in the 1960s, and in a bar somewhere in Europe, and he had to resign. So I went to see the prime minister, and I said, I will resign. There's a precedent, and I'll be responsible of that. And so I did resign, and I was able to be back in cabinet a couple of years later.
It is amazing comparing that. Even if anybody wants to take you at the worst of this, yeah, you forgot a confidential document. That was the level of the scandal at the time compared to what we're witnessing these days. So but you remain in politics 2006 to 2000, well, to present.
Yeah,
The
and
falling
and
out.
in two, yeah, but in 2008, that was the election after that scandal, and I was elected with the biggest majority in both, and in outside Alberta for the Conservative, and that's why after that, Prime Minister Harper gave me another portfolio.
Excellent. Now, explain. There was a falling out with the Conservative Party. I don't think people understand how, there's an expression, how dirty they did you when you had the leadership race in, was it 2015 or 2018?
2017, the leadership race, ending at the end in spring 2017.
Okay, so we've lived through the leadership race, and I'll put it in quotes because the liberal race was not a race; it was an anointment. But explain for those who may not know how the leadership races work within the parties within Canadian politics.
Yeah, it's the members only who has the right to vote for the leadership contest. And so, for example, I was before that, before that leadership, that vote in 2017. All the media, the mainstream media in Canada, were saying Bernie will be the new leader, Bernie will be elected. I had 85% chances to be the leader, but I was not the candidate of the establishment conservative. I didn't want me because I was challenging a lot of policies, and so we can have a discussion about that later. But didn't like my position about abolishing corporate subsidies, the cartel in milk, poultry, and eggs, and a lot of my policies. So I was not the candidate of the establishment. So what they did the night of the election, and you can see the video about that. They said, we have a winner. The winner is Andrew Scheer, 51%, Bernier, 49%, and we destroyed the ballots. So just a couple of hours after the vote, they destroyed the ballot. And the day after, in the Global Mail, the big newspaper in Canada, they were saying that at that time we were about 240,000 members. And the Global Mail was saying, they had 250,000 votes. So, and they said that, 250,000 people voted, but we had 240,000 members. So they had to create 10,000 votes to be sure that, I won't win. And they did it. They cheated.
Because it's a straight majority. It's 50
Yeah.
plus percent is, and there was only you and Andrew Scheer at the time.
Yeah. Because, there's in the beginning, they had 12 candidates, but, at the end, that was only me and Andrew Scheer. Yes.
And it was 51-49, and they purportedly destroyed the ballots before there could be. Are there no internal
Because
procedures?
before they can be challenged, because after that, when I've read that piece from the Global Mail, we did a research, and that was true. So I said to the Conservative Party, I want a recount, and they said, oh, we destroyed the ballots. So that's why I said when I resigned after that, this party is morally and intellectually corrupt. They did cheat at the at my leadership contest in 2017. And also, they don't want to speak about real conservative values when real conservative values are not popular. So what I'm saying, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and all the leaders before, they're doing politics by polling and focus group. They are not leader. They will follow the public opinion. They're following the public opinion. They don't want to be out there when it's not that popular and try to influence or educate or inform the public opinion. And so, in Canada, as you know, David, the media, the leftist media, uh, is manipulating the public opinion because our media are very leftist, and some of them are activists, liberal activists. We don't have, like in the state, a Fox News and CNN. All our media, Radio Canada, CBC, CTV, they're all, progressive and leftist. So the public opinion in Canada is more to the left, actually, because of the media. So, and the Conservative Party is following the public opinion. By doing that, they're giving credibility to the leftist narrative, and that's what they're doing right now.
I just need to flesh out the fundamental, I would call it, maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but unbridgeable gap between you and the Conservatives. Some people say, would you ever go back to the Conservatives? I know your answer is a hard no, and maybe people will now understand why. Because it doesn't, and look, full disclosure, everybody, like I like Maxime, and I've heard the story and I know what I believe. It wasn't just the leadership race where they screwed you. What was this is where I got my first impression of the PPC, from the media that you're talking about, depicting you and the PPC as racist, anti-Semites, etc. And
Yeah.
when I discovered that was as a result of, that was something of a conservative intelligence operation to
Yes.
defame and besmirch you. Can you explain that?
Yeah, our first election and my first election as the leader in Canada, as the leader of the People's Party, was in 2019. And one of our policy on our platform is, to fight mass immigration. And at that time, I was saying, we need to control our immigration, and we need to have a maximum of 150,000 newcomers, foreigners, every year in Canada. And, the media and the conservative were saying to me that, oh, because of that, I'm a racist, and our party is a racist party. So during the electoral campaign, they did pay, conservative activists to discredit us. And, he was spinning the media in Canada, saying that we were racist. And the media published a lot of pieces. And we had people who were saying that they were with us. And now they resigned from the party, from the People's Party, because this party is a racist party. But these people were not members of our party. So Kinsella, the conservative, draft a narrative saying that we're racist because of our position on immigration. And I can tell you, I had Jewish candidates, door knocking downtown Toronto, and they were saying, oh, if you're with the PPC, I don't vote for you. It's a racist party. And that was not the case. That has never been the case. But they were very successful to discredit us. Yes, you're right. So
No,
that's
no.
why this party is corrupt.
And not to name anybody, but Warren Kinsella is the same scumbag who has now blocked me on Twitter for pointing things out. And by the way, I don't play the identity politics game, but when I ran for the PPC in 2021, I don't remember the name of the journal. They say, why would this Jewish YouTube star run with the People's Party of Canada? And it took me some time to get over that initial impression. There was a lawsuit. You lost a defamation lawsuit against Kinsella, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, for defamation, you're right. And the judge said, yeah, maybe what Kinsella said and did was racist, but you are a politician, and he has the right to say what he believes. So that was the end of the case, and I tried to appeal that case, and the Supreme Court said no, we won't hear your case.
I remember that as well. That was back when I started getting into the vlogs, and it's not that I can't understand the decision. I can easily understand the decision. It's a matter of opinion, politics. We don't have the same criteria of actual malice in Canada, but it's very similar standards for defamation. And I wouldn't have expected that to succeed in the States. I was more optimistic of it succeeding in Canada, but it didn't. That's the background for anybody who did not know who you were, why the party has that reputation. And it wasn't actually just the machinations of the liberal machine. It was actually the conservative machine, to explain why, Maxime, not to put words in your mouth, very unlikely of you ever joining forces again with the conservatives.
But but I must add also to that, it would be very difficult for the conservative or anybody in Canada to say that we are racist right now. You know, we have the immigration is a big file in Canada. It's a big, you know, we have that mass immigration that is affecting everybody. And now our position on mass immigration is to have a moratorium, you know, a pause on immigration, and to be able also to deport all these illegals that we have here in Canada. But you know, we were right in 2019. We are even more right today. But you know, we are fighting for Canada, and you know, diversity is in Canada. We just want, you know, our country to keep our social fabric, and now mass immigration is destroying the social fabric of our country.
Well, and now we can actually get into the concrete policies, because I do recall when you were called xenophobic and racist, it was not to ban immigrants or kick them out. It was to limit it at a cap. At
Yes.
the time, it was 150,000. Well, it has been at 500,000 a year for the last 6, 7 years, Maxime.
Yeah, for the last 3 years, and now, you know, last year we had more than 1.2 million foreigners coming to our country, with no vetting. Also, that's important to say, and people coming from, you know, third world countries, and they are coming here. They don't have a job. They cannot integrate into our society. Some of them are not speaking English or French. So, you know, our immigration system is a big mess. We need to have that pause. And now, you know, we have the fake foreign students from India that are coming here, and, you know, they have a fake diploma. And after that, they want to stay instead of leaving and going back to their country of origin. And you have the conservative and the liberals who are telling them, you know, you don't respect our legislation, but we will give you a nice gift. We will give you permanent residency. So that's why, you know, we need to end that. And that's a big distinction for this campaign between us and all these mainstream political parties, the conservatives and the liberals.
We're gonna have to address the big thorn, which is the vote splitting argument, but we'll get there in a second. Right now, I
Yeah.
just want to flesh out the policy. So I mean, it's been the last I don't know how many years, say half decade, that 97+% of population growth in Canada is from immigration. We'll get into all of the other terrible policies in a second, but the issue of the day, and it led to the tariffs, was that there are a number of people, a disproportionate amount of people on terror watch lists apprehended crossing into the States from Canada than even from Mexico. And why it's so important is that I don't know what the exact proportion is. You have like 10 times more people crossing illegally from Mexico to the States than from Canada to the States, but you have like 6 times more people apprehended on terror watch lists from Canada into the United States. I mean,
Actually, David, it's about 80% of them, you know, uh, terrorist suspect, you know, 80% of them the last 3 years are coming from our country, from Canada.
do you know how many of them have temporary visas, student visas, or travel vacation visas? Like, how are they getting into Canada in the first place? My understanding, it's primarily student visas, which are being handed out like candy.
Yes.
Anywhere between 5 and 10% of those people don't end up going to their classes, and they disappear into society and don't report back for leaving.
You're absolutely right. The majority of them is fake international students.
Who? Okay, I mean that's a Trudeau liberal, or that is a former Trudeau policy, liberal policy. What's the conservatives' position on that? I don't hear any opposition.
No, you know, the conservative on that, you know, they are pandering, and they are pandering to every ethnic groups. Polyev is doing that, like Trudeau, actually. Every weekend, he will have a new costume and he will pander because, you know, in Canada, you have a couple of ridings that are very important to win and to have a majority. And these ridings have a big majority of, you know, new Canadians. And so they're living in ghettos. We have a couple of ghettos in Canada, one in Burnaby, you know, British Columbia,
Mhm.
Brampton, Ontario, and so, you know, Polyev and all these and also Carney and the Liberals, they're pandering to them to have their vote. So what, answering your questions, what Polyev said to them, he wanted them to have, all these illegal immigrants and foreign workers is ready to give them the permanent residency. So they don't want to speak about deportation, but they're illegals right now here in our country. And Immigration and Citizenship Canada, that department, said that there's about 25,000 to half a million of illegals in Canada right now. And this year, we'll have about 4 million temporary permits that will be expired. And so you'll have more illegals. But the conservative and the liberals are not speaking about deportation of all these illegals. No, they're doing the opposite. They're telling them, we will give you permanent residency. And that's that's huge. That will be a big part of the election, and Canadians are fed up with that. If you read the survey in Canada and the polling, 65% of Canadians are saying enough is enough for immigration. But Polyev is not listening to that majority because he's listening to different writings where all these immigrants want to have more of their people coming to Canada, and they want these international students to stay in Canada. So that's why Polyev is not doing the right thing for the country.
I'm not wrong. It's 1 in 4 Canadians currently are born outside of the country.
Yes, yeah, that's a statistic, absolutely.
Uh,
And
let me.
like you said, 97% of the growth of our population, in Canada, the growth of our population last year was 3.2%. And the average growth of population of the Western countries last year was 0.2%. So yes, we have mass immigration in Canada. And the growth of our population, like you just said, is due to mass immigration, 97%. So that's the beginning of the replacement theory, and that's not a theory anymore. If we are having that mass immigration every year, that would be a replacement of our population in Canada.
People need to understand this because now that you said it that way, and I hadn't actually thought of it, that the population growth over 3%. So whatever population of Canada is now, let's just say 40 million for the sake of math.
Yeah.
3.2, divide that by 2, and then minus another 20%. So that's like 1 point some odd million
Yeah.
growth compared to what is not that percentage of growth in other countries. And of that 1.2 million and change, 97%, 1+ million people are growth comes from immigration.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the top 3 countries, I forget what they are now. I'm fairly certain it's India. There were some in Africa that I forget what the top 5 are, but these
Yeah.
are
These are not
potentially
Western.
hostile nations.
Yeah, these are not Western countries, and so uh, that's why the problem is and add to that, Viva, add to that the Multiculturalism Act in Canada. We are promoting multiculturalism, so and that's a failure that didn't work in Europe, didn't work in Germany and in UK, but here in Canada we are telling these immigrants and foreigners, you can keep your culture, don't integrate into our society. And the federal government would give money to, for example, celebrate the new Chinese year. I don't have anything about the new Chinese year. But that being said, if they want to celebrate that, they can use their own money. The federal government must celebrate our culture, our identity, our history, but they're not doing that. So multiculturalism plus mass immigration, that's a recipe for a disaster.
That there, I feel like I'm going crazy because it's like you watch the news and it feels like pure gaslighting. At one point, not that long ago, I think it was 4 months, Trudeau came out and said, "Yeah, we have to address the immigration problem, the student visa problem," and then there was a fight with Trump, and then he says all of a sudden, "No, we're back to open borders again. Everybody who wants to flee the Trump regime come up to Canada." Am I crazy, or did Trudeau not acknowledge, as of very recently, that the immigration policies of the Liberals, he didn't say it quite this way, he says now universities are abusing of the visas and corporations are abusing of the visas and we got to tamp down, only then a month later to say open back up?
Yeah, they did, put some restrictions on universities to and colleges to bring foreign students. They did that, but I don't know if it's enforced or not. But yeah, Trudeau said it. We will do it. So we'll see. And now what is happening is they don't want to address that issue. The big issue in Canada right now, as you know, Viva, is Trump and the tariffs and the trade war and the 51st state. But immigration is the big problem in Canada right now.
There was Ruby Dalla. I'm sure you followed the scandal. When she came on to the channel, I was A, surprised that she came on, and B, surprised by her policies, given that she's a purported liberal, in that her open policy is having deportations of illegal immigrants. It was to be expected that she would be stabbed in the back, viciously by that corrupt liberal party. Have you been in touch with her in terms of potentially seeing if she would come over to the dark side? I'm
No.
joking, but come over to the PPC side?
Yeah, no, I know her. I was sitting with her in Parliament. She was in the opposition. I was in government. But I was not surprised about that position. That's the best position, just to have a pause and deportation. She understood that, but I'm not surprised also that the establishment of the Liberal Party said we don't want you in that leadership contest. But maybe that's a good idea to be in touch with her. I didn't call her, but we are promoting a policy like that for the last 6 years. So she will be welcome in our party.
And I made the joke with her. I said, I sort of see you being a conservative in a bit, except your policies are more conservative than the conservative policies, so-called conservatives.
Yeah.
Okay, so immigration, massive problem. It's a known problem. I mean, we talk about the Great Replacement theory, and I say it's not conspiracy, it's not racist, because it is what it is. And the mass immigration could be coming from anywhere. If you had 1 million plus Russians coming into Canada, you'd have people probably up in arms for other reasons. If you had 1 million plus Ukrainians coming into Canada, you would probably notice some cultural confrontations, to put it mildly. I mean, what is there an appetite, or is Canada already too far gone in terms of the scope and breadth of the immigration problem?
Yes, there's an appetite for that. And I can tell you that when I'm traveling across the country, in a pre-electoral campaign, I'm speaking about that, and it's very well received. People are fed up with that, and they know that we still have a chance to save this country. And I said, the People's Party of Canada is the only hope for Canada. If you want to save that country, our platform must be adopted. Our platform, electoral platform, political platform, must be part of the legislations in Canada, not only because of immigration, but also you have in Alberta, a separatist movement over there. You have that in Quebec with the PQ, and there's other problems with the equalization formula. That's a formula in our constitution where rich provinces are giving money through the federal government to poor provinces, and Quebec, my own province, is under that formula a poor province since 1957, and that's not the reality. We need to change that formula. It's unfair, and Western Canadians are fed up to give money to Eastern Canadians. But the Liberals and the Conservative won't talk about that. So and the fact that that net zero and the climate alarmism, it's all in Ottawa, and they're putting regulations against Western Canadians. So we need to stop all that. Having a smaller government in Ottawa, that's the solution to keep this country and to have a real country that everybody will be happy in your province if you respect the Constitution and respect the autonomy of provincial government.
That's the example I often give when people say, do you trust Maxime Bernier? And I say, I trust him. He's principled to the point of potentially his own political detriment, because coming from La Beauce and not supporting the equalization payments, for those who don't know what it is, the rich provinces pay into the federal with their taxes, that the federal then takes it and redistributes it to the poor provinces, which tend to be the Maritimes, which are not resource rich, even though they could be, and they could be tourist rich. And some people feel like it's stealing from the rich to give to the poor, except the poor aren't actually poor. They're just unjustly benefiting from it. And I say taking a position to revise or revisit equalization payments is not going to be popular in Beauce or in Quebec, and you do it nonetheless. Now, people
and speaking about that, just for your viewers, the federal government is in that equalization formula is giving about $26 billion to poor provinces. And half of that, $13 billion last year, went to Quebec. And why Quebec is a poor province? Because in that formula, Quebec has a lot of hydroelectricity, but all the income that the federal government will have with taxes on that industry, hydroelectricity, it is not part of the formula, but all the income that the federal government will have with taxes on oil and gas industry, it is part of the formula. So Quebec is a poor province. And if you stop, and I'm saying that in French also, if we stop the equalization payment, yeah, Quebec won't have $13 billion a year, but that will give a right incentive for Quebec and New Brunswick to develop their own natural resources, because there's a lot of shale gas in Quebec. And right now, there's a moratorium on the exploitation of shale gas. So if you stop that, they will develop their own natural resources. Quebec and Eastern Canada and New Brunswick will be richer. So that's the solution. But traditional politicians don't want to say that. But I said in French in Quebec that I'm not proud to be a Quebecer when we receive equalization money and Quebec is supposed to be a poor province. Quebec must be a rich province. We must develop our own natural resources, and we are not doing that. So that's a big change. But when I'm saying that in Quebec or in English in Nova Scotia, it is well received. People understand that it's unfair, but you have to explain that. But in politics today, politicians don't take time to explain things. They're doing politics by slogan and literal slogans, and they don't want to explain anything to their population. Actually, traditional politicians think that Canadians and voters are stupid, so they don't want to go out there and do another step and explain that. We think that people are intelligent, and we are appealing to their intelligence as a political party.
Well, no, it is amazing because people don't appreciate that. I've always long said by crippling the energy industry in Canada, you're not helping the environment, you're outsourcing the pollution. And it's happening at the macro level where Quebec says, we're a poor province, keep treating us like one so that we don't have to develop our natural resources, so we can outsource the pollution to, if you consider it to be that, to Alberta, and then we can get their tax monies, and still, it's a social welfare system at the provincial level.
Absolutely.
And I was going to say something else as relates to the politicians not explaining it, Maxime. When I see Justin Trudeau, or if and when I ever see them doing long format discussion like you do on not necessarily hostile but potentially adversarial media, then I will have a slightest bit more respect for them. But thus far, it is a campaign of slogans, and you are one of the few politicians up in Canada who likes doing or agrees to do long format interview. Although I'm not going to be too hard on you, but I'll be hard on you on a couple of things. Okay, so the population growth, all immigration, and the population killing the local population with the medical assistance and dying stuff that's going on in Canada.
Yeah,
I cannot get over how off the rails it is. I just had on Kelsey Sheeran, who's on a mission to fight medical assistance and dying. People think it's a conspiracy theory, but Maxime, but when you promote literally death and replacement by immigration, how else is anybody supposed to appreciate what the Canadian government is doing to Canadians? Because they do exist.
And Quebec, my own province of Quebec, is the world leader in assisted suicide. And actually, in the beginning, that was only legal to do that in a hospital. Now the Quebec government changed their regulations, and they said, if you want to die in a park, we'll allow that. If you want to die at your home, we'll allow that. So, and the healthcare system in Quebec is not so efficient. There's a long waiting list for surgeries. And so you'd think that they're pushing that to save costs. I don't know. But it's crazy what is happening in Quebec right now and all across the country. But Quebec is the worst one in that we are killing people like anybody across the world.
I think Quebec was we call it medical assistance in dying or assisted suicide, and I've been calling it state-sanctioned murder because I think that's what it is in a great many cases. It was the third leading cause of death in Quebec. And it was so bad after this Daily Mail article, blew the story open, and hopefully I had a role in amplifying it. The government had to pull back the willy-nilly handing out of death. I mean, I know you often talk about the globalists, and I put it in quotes. I believe in it, so it's going to be tough for me to not to push back on that. But I mean, who is doing this, and why are they doing this, and is Canada ripe for this for any particular reason?
Yeah, when I'm speaking about globalist and the establishment, the elite establishment, look at in Europe, for example, they have now a European government with the economic community over there, and and that's why actually UK decided with Brexit to go out and regain their sovereignty and their independence. But at the UN, the goal of the UN is to have a world government, and they want to do that. But it won't happen in 1 year. It won't happen in 10 years, maybe in 50 years. But that's the goal of the globalists. So they have institutions like, the World Health Organization that is telling other countries what to do. But I must admit that the World Health Organization, they don't have any, army. They cannot enforce their socialist policies. But because of, politicians who believes like Trudeau, who believe in that socialist idea that they know better than the people. So Trudeau decided to implement the World Health Organization ideas and policies, and other countries did that. But actually, we are a sovereign country. But the influence, and I'm seeing these organizations like think tank, they are promoting socialist, communist ideas, and they're very efficient by doing that, and they have the media on their side who is helping them to promote these ideas. And you have countries who are doing that, but you can end that if you just say no to that. And that's why President Trump, when he said we won't be part of the Paris Accord, and I'm saying the same thing, but in Canada, we are the only party that is saying no to the Paris Accord, no to the WHO, and no to the UN Compact on migration. Why do you have migration? The UN, they promote migration. They think, if you're a citizen of Zimbabwe, you have the right to come to Canada and to be a Canadian citizen. We know we are not believing in that. Being a Canadian citizen is a privilege, and we Canadians must decide who's going to be Canadian citizen or not. And we signed that migration compact, and Trudeau is all in, and the Liberals are all in with that, and the Conservatives are saying, oh, we have a lot of people, but we're going to limit the immigration of 250,000 foreigners a year. But 250,000 a year right now is too much because of that mass immigration that we had the last couple of years. We need to have that pause. But for Polyev, he won't go there because he's pandering to ethnic communities, like I said. So these global organization, UN and other organizations are very efficient, but we need to be out there and say no to that. And we don't buy that globalist ideology.
I, I, my concern is maybe you're on the ground and not in a silo, but you're meeting constituents or people who, in general, agree with you. I'm sitting here now from the outside after having run for the PPC in 2021. Went knocking on doors, people saying why they. I'm not even signing your paper to get you on the ballot. Is how much I think I hate the PPC. But I don't feel that there's the appetite among the general population, and I don't know if I've gotten too cynical. It seems like there's too many who have bought into this globalist madness to some extent. Like our country should be open for everybody. It's defeatism. The problem is too big. We can't kick people out. It's not humane. I don't feel that there's the actual public pushback that got Trump elected in America, the equivalent of that in Canada, despite your best efforts. I mean, do you disagree with that? And what's the option, even if I'm right?
But the opposition to these globalist ideas like mass immigration, it's becoming stronger every day, every year. And I can tell you, when I started that to speak like that in 2018, 2019, it was not that popular. It was very difficult. You just said it, for our candidates across the country. Now it's easier, and people understand. They can see that their son didn't have a job last summer because that was a fake foreign students who had that job, and we are importing cheap labor with that mass immigration. So now mass immigration is affecting a lot of people across the country, and more understand. But it's we are not at the same point as in US. You're right about that, or in UK or in France. But our time will come, and it may be at this election, it may be at another election. But I can see a growing movement, in line with our ideas.
You mentioned the Brexit and the UN and what it wants to do to Europe, and it's a perfect sort of way to introduce the man of the hour, the carnival barker Carney, who was a critic of Brexit back in the time when he was living in the UK. People don't seem to know who Carney is or was, or what his role was in the Trudeau administration up until recently. You're much more familiar with Carney and his political influence than anybody else. Could you flesh it out for those who may not know?
Yeah, Carney is for me, and in reality, the globalist in chief. He was the UN envoy for climate action and finance. He's all in with the climate emergency. That's a little bit bizarre that he decided to abolish the carbon tax in Canada, but he will impose other taxes and regulations to fight climate change. So Carney is a real globalist. He's part of the elites, actually. And, in Canada right now, we don't need a guy like that. And I believe that he won't be able to win the election. People will see him and the real Mark Carney. And you're right about Brexit. He was against that, against the sovereignty of UK. And his term as a governor of the Bank of England was not so great. So Carney is the elite. Is doing politics right now in Canada as the leader of the Liberal Party, but and is the prime minister not elected? That's why we may have an election in a couple of days in Canada. But that being said, he is a real globalist. He's part of the elite, the World Economic Forum. He's part of all these people, and for him, he will do. And that's why also I must say that yesterday, the Albertan government decided to table a legislation in Alberta saying that our natural resources are our natural resources, and we don't want any interference coming from the federal government. So we want to listen to you, the federal government, who are telling us that we must have, net zero emission and all, your crazy climate ideology. We won't follow that here in Alberta. We don't want any civil servants working for the federal government to go to our industry. You won't have the right to do that. So Danielle Smith is very protecting the oil and gas industry, and she's right, because it is a 100% provincial jurisdictions. And now I think she's afraid of Carney, because Carney, if he's elected, may come with more regulations against the oil and gas industry, knowing what he believes and what he did in the past with the UN.
I gotta highlight that point as well. That Mark Carney, he's lived the better part of the decade in the UK. I often make fun of him as a three passport carrying
Yeah.
WEF globalist, fill in the blank. It was one of the highlights of Pierre Poilievre. I do give him a lot of flack, but I'll give him a little bit of credit when he deserves it. It was a while back where he's talking to Carney about his investments, and Carney's talking about how Western governments who have the technology need to go green, but the developing nations whose technology is not quite there, they get to continue dirty pollution. And it is exposed, or he inadvertently admits, he's investing on both ends in terms of betting against the clean energy in Western countries and investing in the dirty energies in developing countries. And he says it's not a double standard, it's a jurisdictional thing. Carney, the Liberals have been crippling Alberta, but outsourcing that pollution to the rest of the world. Is there any, it's a loaded question. Is there any good reason to cripple energy independence in Canada when it just results in Canada having to beg for oil from Venezuela, from Saudi Arabia, or get energy from dirty producing countries, or empower China?
There's no reason, there's no logic for that. We have a lot of natural resources, we must exploit them. And there's a way to do that in 2025 by respecting the environment. And now the problem that we have, we don't have any pipelines. We are sending our oil and gas to the U.S. We need the pipelines that will go to the east, sorry, the Atlantic Canada, to the west, to the Pacific. And the private sector is ready to build that. But with all these regulations and legislation that Trudeau impose against that, it's not happening. So we need to have a new government that will allow that. And we are, when you speak about climate change, the climate is always changing. CO2 is not a pollutant, but Polyev won't admit that. The problem with Polyev, he won't impose a carbon tax, and he won't impose also maybe the industrial carbon tax. But because he's in line with the Paris Accord, he will have to put more regulations and do, for example, carbon capture. That's very costly. We are giving billions of dollars to capture CO2, but CO2 is not a pollutant. So let's stop that. Don't We must not participate in that logic of climate emergency. And CO2 is a gas essential for life, but Polyev won't go there. And that's the problem. He's okay with the Paris Accord, but at least he want to impose new taxes. But when you impose regulations on businesses, businesses will have to transfer that to consumers, and it's always consumers who are paying. But and we are only our green gas are only maybe about less than 2% of the global green gas emissions. So you can do everything in Canada, and you won't change the climate, or you won't have any impact on the global climate.
And people should appreciate that. I think it's like 1.5 or 1.25% of global emissions, even if you think that global emissions are a problem. And if you shut it down to zero, you wipe Canada in terms of energy production off the map. Well, that production will go to another country, which will actually make up and probably pollute 3% more. And also, the CO2. It's almost like plants and trees consume CO2 and emit oxygen. But actually, one last thing on the carbon tax before I forget. Carney comes in his first act as unelected, anointed prime minister, signs that executive order, whatever the hell that piece of paper was, which declares it orders somebody to reduce the consumer portion of the carbon tax to zero. People are saying it's not even a legal mechanism what he did, and that even if it is or were to be legal, all that they're going to do is reduce the consumer portion of the carbon tax, the amount individual citizens have to pay, reduce it now while they run their liberal election, and then bring it right back if and when they ever get into power. Are you able to comment on the legality of what he signed, and if that is a correct assessment of their dirty, rotten scoundrel of a strategy?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the legality of all that, but for me, it's more a marketing, presentation. He did like Trump a little bit, signing, an order. But it's marketing. In Canada, if you want to change a regulation, you have to publish it in advance, 30 days in advance, and after that, that regulation will be enforced. You need to have comments coming from the population. So I don't know what trick is using. But if he's back in power after the election, if he's the prime minister, he may not reimpose a carbon tax, but he will impose another kind of tax. So what he's doing. It's just to be sure that he will have something to say during the election campaign that is against the carbon tax, but is for the Paris Accord. That's the most important, and he believes that CO2 is a pollutant, so that's the most important. And yes, he will come back with other regulations or other taxes.
Yeah, so some people are saying, hey, they're not getting rid of it. They're going to impose the consumer portion on the company side, which they're just going to increase prices and pass it back down to the consumer.
Yeah.
Here's the question: what the hell is wrong with Pierre Poilievre? And I'm asking this, like, it's not that I want him to get elected. And some people say I'm criticizing him because I don't like him, or I might be criticizing him because I hate the liberals, and you want the opposition to be opposition. With this tariff war, I mean, my view is that he could not have handled it any worse than he did. Is there any other explanation you see to how he handled this threat of tariffs and this spat with Trump? Is it an absolute monumental fumble, or is there something that I'm missing to this?
No, you're right about it. That's a big mistake from his part. He think that being against Trump and insulting Trump will help him in Canada. And actually, is the first one who said we must impose counter tariffs, dollar for dollar. And I said, when you're doing that, you are imposing a new tax. These tariffs that the Canadian government is imposing, it's on us, Canadian consumers and Canadian businesses. We are paying for that, and we cannot win a trade war. The US is 10 times bigger than us. But Polyev is okay with that and is pushing. And you know what is interesting is, yeah, Trudeau did impose 25% tariffs. And Carney, as the prime minister, had a question, I think, a couple of days ago. And he said, are you ready to impose more tariffs? And he said bluntly, he said, I don't think it's a good idea because it may hurt more Canadians than the US. And, we are 10 times, they are 10 times bigger than us. So Carney, on that point, is more pro Canadian consumers than Polyev, and he's ready to stop that trade war. But Polyev said, no, no, we must. If Trump is imposing more tariffs April 2nd, Polyev is out there and say we must do the same. So I don't understand what he's doing, but I think that it will be popular during the electoral campaign to be against Trump because maybe when in US you had the presidential election in Canada, they did a survey at the same time and they did ask Canadians what is their preference, Trump or Harris, and 65% of the population said that they would have voted for Harris instead of Trump, for the Democrats instead of the Republican. So maybe he has that in mind and is following the polls and being against Trump. He thinks that it is good. First, it's not good for the country. You won't be able to have if you're prime minister, you won't be able to, it will be more difficult to have a good trade deal with Trump. And second, we are paying, Canadians are paying that trade war. So just stop that. If you are saying that you are putting Canadian first, that is slogan. Polyev is saying, I'm putting my country first, Canadian first. If you saying that, you must act, and you're not acting in line with your slogan because you are imposing, taxing Canadians with with these counter tariffs. So it's I don't know. He is helping the liberals by doing that.
I'm actually a little bit surprised it was only 65 to 35 that would have voted, that would have preferred Kamala. That's actually mildly encouraging. I would have said 80, but that might just be because of the people I know up in Canada. So it was going to be a question about the tariffs. The issues that Trump initially raised were fentanyl crossing the border and illegals. People respond, well, it's your border, you protect it. But there is a very serious fentanyl problem going on in Canada, big busts going on in Canada, and I should be having Sam Cooper on sooner than later to go over this. What is your understanding of the... There's two things. There are massive amounts of fentanyl busts, unless I'm mistaken, big ones going on in Canada. And there is some discussion that the reason why the government wants to decriminalize hard drugs is because they're in bed with the manufacturers, the producers, now illicit, of hard drugs. Do you have any insider baseball knowledge of those issues?
I don't have any insight about that, but
Damn.
what I can tell you, you're right. That was the philosophy of the Trudeau government to decriminalize all these hard drugs. That's a big failure. They started that an experiment in Vancouver. That's a big failure. We must stop that. And actually, yes, all that, fentanyl is coming from China at the port of Vancouver, and after that they are transforming that in Toronto and Vancouver, and that is going to the US. The federal government is saying, oh, it's only 1%. It is not only 1%, it is more than that. So Trump has a point there. We need to be tough on crime. We need to fight, these drug traffickers, and we are starting now to do that. That's why he decided to impose 25% tariffs, because of fentanyl, but also because of the fact that we are not protecting our own borders. And if you want to solve that, you must start by having that pause on immigration, that moratorium, and deporting the illegals, and yes, protecting the borders. Now the federal government is starting to do that. But you know what? I believe that as a Canadian, I must thank President Trump for that, because now, after 9 years, you have the Liberal government that is working to protect Canadians, and by protecting our borders, by fighting crimes. It took 9 years and President Trump for our federal government to invest and spend money to protect Canadians and fighting crimes. And that is the first role of a government. Be sure that your citizen will be secure. And now the federal government is doing that. But also, we must admit that there's more in these tariffs. And like Trump said, that's the most beautiful word in the dictionary. He likes tariffs because also for him that will be important to repatriate the manufacturing sector, manufacturing industry in US. And by doing that, is sending a strong message that, if you are a business person, you come invest in the US, we are open to investment. And, it will be easier for you to sell your goods to Americans if you are here in the US. So that's all that debate also in the US. And that's why we need to sit with President Trump and reopening the free trade agreement, put everything on the table, and not wait until 2026, because that's the date for the reopening of the free trade agreement in 2026. Do that right now. Have a good discussion, put everything on the table. But Polyev and Carney are not ready to put everything on the table.
I don't think Trump even wants to legitimize Carney as a prime minister. Technical question: he doesn't. Carney is not an MP, and so am I right in that he can't actually be the prime minister until he wins a seat, or can someone give him a seat in the interim?
No, if you look at, we are a parliamentary system in Canada, like in UK, and there's some precedent in UK for that. That's why, he is the prime minister, but, he doesn't have any legitimacy. And that's why he will call an election soon to be elected. But if he wants to govern until this October, there's a by-election in Nova Scotia. He can be a candidate in Nova Scotia. That by-election will be April 10th, and he can be elected there, and he will be in Parliament. So he has two options: call the election in a couple of days, and we'll have that election, and he will be elected or not as prime minister or not. And or if you want to govern, go and be elected at that by-election April 10th, and he will be able to be in Parliament after that, and he will have more legitimacy. And now, he's there, but
Which
it's happening in the parliamentary system.
which riding in Nova Scotia? Do you know offhand?
Halifax.
Well, okay. I mean, there's some beautiful areas to Nova Scotia. Halifax, from what I understand, as a city now, has gotten a little bit gritty, to put it mildly. And Maxime, speaking of what's going on in Canada, we're seeing images right now of liquor stores shutting off American liquor, people taking pictures of strawberries from America that aren't selling. Is it as brainwashedly mad in Canada as we're seeing it is on social media from down south?
It is, and it's crazy from our government, from the Ontario government and the Quebec government. Both provinces decided, to take all the wine, the wine coming from the US out, and people are not able to buy it right now. It's not on the shelves. But that being said, it's crazy because they paid for it. So it's already paid. It's the money is gone. Now you have the product. Just sell it to Canadians, and you have a lot of Canadians who want
sell it
that.
at a discount. Who's the premier of Alberta?
Daniel Smith.
Okay, no. Sorry, then it's not him. Manitoba. He's a guy. I've been giving him a hard time.
Yeah.
He's got
his name. Yeah,
it's an uncommon name. I think he's a native origin. I need him like, you dummy. You already paid for that. Well, you're not punishing anybody. That and Canada's not.
Actually, my wife last weekend, she wanted to have a good wine from California. And she said, I will go in a little village in Quebec where they have, some wines. And she came, and the guy said, you're the last one. It's the last bottle. I won't be able to have more because I cannot. But if you take that bottle, it is the last one. It's crazy.
It's so well, Maxime. I heard something totally wild that they were finding a way to get around it because they like their wine, and so they were boycotting red states. So Kentucky bourbon. Tennessee Jack Daniels, but they were not boycotting blue states, so they can still get their Napa Valley wine from California. It's virtue signaling gone, political of a national brainwashing level. Maxime, well, one tough question that I should ask, because it's in the news now, and it sort of has direct relevance to Justin Trudeau opening the border to victims, the victims of international conflict. You get a lot of flack for being anti-Israel. And I mean, I'll put it in quotes because I don't believe that it's anti-Israel, but people say if you don't overtly support Israel in its endeavors and with aid against whatever, that you're anti-Israel. Oddly enough, they make the same argument against Ukraine, but people, at least there's a bit more of a political comfort to say, I no longer support the endless war in Ukraine and stop sending the money. But if you say that with Israel, then you're deemed to be anti-Semitic. What is your stance vis-a-vis Israel in particular?
Yeah, like I said before, I'm not pro-Israel. I'm not pro-Ukraine. I'm not pro-Palestine. And I'm pro-Canada. I'm pro our country. So our influence in the Middle East as a country, we don't have any influence. So I don't speak about that. We don't have anything on our platform. That's the U.S. government who can influence the politics in Middle East, not Canada. So that's why we don't have a position. And because we don't have a position about what is happening in Middle East, people are saying, "Oh, you must be anti-Israel." We are not. I was foreign affairs ministers under Harper. I went to Israel a couple of times, and I know the culture. I know what is happening over there. But for me, as the leader of the People's Party, the most important is our country, and we don't want to spend money to Ukraine. I was the only one to say that. We did spend $20 billion to Ukraine. I don't want to spend money for Israel. I want actually to end foreign aid. We are giving $8 billion in foreign aid. I want to end that, bring that money home, and help Canadians first. So that's why we don't have a position on this conflict. And if I had a position, it won't change anything. The most influential one is Trump, and they're doing the politics over there.
This is the other tough question that everybody gives me grief for on the internet. They're going to say, Max, you have no chance of becoming prime minister in the next election. All you're doing is splitting the vote. And I think there was maybe one example where, I forget where it was, but I think it was during 2021, where it could have been argued that the PPC took enough votes from the Conservatives to allow the Liberal or NDP candidate to win. I forget what riding it was.
So splitting the vote. Actually, it's always the argument that the conservative is using, in the campaign. Don't vote for Bernier. Don't vote for your values. Don't vote for a real conservative, because you will split the vote and the liberals will win. So I'm not splitting any vote. Who is splitting the vote is, Pierre Poilievre. He is having the same policies of Trudeau on immigration, on climate change, on the war in Ukraine, on actually the tariffs. So look, Poilievre's goal is to split the liberal votes, and that's why you conservative, 25% of his base are not happy with him. He is splitting the liberal vote. That's why you're not happy. I'm not splitting any vote. Vote for your values, and actually, when we will win, having a couple of seats in parliament, we will support Poilievre. We will support Poilievre when he will be a real conservative, and yes, we will shame him when he won't. So if you like our ideas and you're out there in Canada, I will ask you, vote for us, vote for our ideas. You'll have more chances to have what you want, and we will be more influential. And yes, if we are more influential, like I told you, Poilievre is doing politics by survey and polling. So Poilievre will maybe steal some of our ideas. So if you want to push Poilievre in the right direction, you have to vote for the People's Party.
What I don't know the answer offhand. What percentage of eligible Canadians actually vote? Is it like 50% or is it more?
Yeah, actually, 40% of the population at the last election did not vote. 40% of them. So
No, 40% of those eligible did not vote.
yeah, those
Okay.
eligible. Yeah, and so the population is 40 million people. Maybe the eligible would be 30 million, something like that. I don't have the number, But yeah, a lot of Canadians didn't vote. And for me, I want these people to vote for us. If we have half of the 40% who didn't vote, we'll be at 20%. And if you don't vote, usually it's because you're seeing politicians like the same, and you don't trust these establishment politicians. And we are doing politics differently. You can trust us because we don't change our electoral platform at every election. We don't do any polling and focus group. It's our ideas. And what I'm saying right now, I said that in 2019, 2018, 2021. It's always the same platform. So we are doing politics differently, using by ideas and conviction. So we're different than the establishment politicians. So usually, if you don't vote, it's because you don't trust them. And I'm asking you, go out and vote. And like that, we'll be able to change and to start that, revolution.
That was the most compelling rebuttal that someone said to me. It's like, you're not splitting a vote if they don't vote. And I don't know what percentage of PPC voters, if you've ever done the internal polling, voted for the first time or said they would otherwise not vote. PPC we got 600,000 votes in 2021.
845,000 votes. And you're right, Viva. When I'm traveling, and I like to hear that people are telling me, Maxime, it will be the first time that I will vote at the federal level. That's great. If these people can come, we are not taking votes from the conservative when these people are coming to us.
How do you think this plays out in the next election, if and when it's called sooner than later? What do you foresee as being the outcome?
Yeah, I don't see the Liberals being able to win that election. If you look at the history of our country, you had, Brian Mulroney was elected with the biggest majority in 1988 in Parliament, the biggest majority in the history of our country. And, in 1993, after 9 years, Mulroney was not popular. They put Kim Campbell, the first lady leader of a national political party. They went up in the polls. But when the election was called, Campbell was not able to win. People voted against the conservative. And from the biggest majority in the history, Mulroney went to the biggest, he had only two seats. Only two seats. And after that, you can, Jean Chrétien. Jean Chrétien, after 9 years, people were fed up with him. And yeah, they voted for the conservative. So 9 years usually. And Carney can do everything to distance himself from the liberal, record. But the population won't buy that. I believe so, and I don't think that Poilievre will be able to be elected. The history will come, and people will vote for a new government. And for me, that's a nice opportunity because we can be that voice in Parliament. We can have, our first candidate elected, and we can have our movement being out there and pushing, in the right direction for a smaller government, more freedom, more autonomy for provinces. And so I'm seeing that election a great election for us, for the PPC. And actually, we may be able to have a full slate of candidates across the country. So every Canadian will be able to vote for the PPC. And we are ready for this election. But Carney, my fight during the election will be against Carney and against Poilievre and telling the truth to Canadians.
I'm not wrong in that Carney has been advising Trudeau on issues for the last 5 years. He's been
he was his economic advisor. So
Okay.
he cannot say, I didn't like these big deficit. He was the one who gave advice to Trudeau to do these big deficit and not balancing the budget.
That's like, not that you need any advice, because you don't. For people who think that Carney is somehow different than the Liberals, he's been the driving force behind the scenes. You just never knew his name. I'm trying to think if I forgot anything, Maxime. I think this is the vote splitting was the big one. And so what do you? So if you anticipate the election is going to be called sooner than later, you're going to be in full campaign mode. That was the question. Full slate of candidates across the country. I think PPC had a full slate back in 2021 as well, right? Maybe with the exception of one riding.
Or maybe 15 ridings. We're
15,
not
okay.
able to have a full slate.
So there's 338 ridings in Canada. Which riding are you going to be running in next election?
Yeah. So for this election, Viva, there's 343 because of the growth of the population and mass immigration. Now, they have to adjust the ridings, and one riding in Canada, one member of parliament, usually we represent 100,000 people. So that's why they added more ridings, and now at this election that will be 343, and I will run again in both. And we have a strong team over there, and that will be a very interesting and I believe a successful election for us. This one.
Well, people give you a hard time because the last time you didn't win in your own town. Has the sentiment in Beauce changed where you think you have a better chance of reaching the people this time?
Yeah, because the dairy producers in both who we didn't have time to speak about the cartel, but in Canada we have a cartel in dairy, poultry, and eggs, a legal cartel. They are fixing the price, fixing the production, and Canadian consumers are paying twice the
Oh,
price. If you
and they're imposing massive tariffs on U.S. imports in that industry. Am I wrong?
Yeah, yeah. We
Okay.
are paying twice the price if you compare that with the prices in the US. And to do that, to be able to not having any competitions, the federal government is imposing 300% tariffs on meal, poultry, and eggs. So like that's why President Trump is not happy with that. And I'm ready. I'm the only one who said we're gonna put that on the table. But going back to my writing, in both, there's a lot of dairy producers there. And I told them, we need to have an agreement with Trump. Your privilege will end. And I'm serious about you. We need to speak about compensation to be able to give you a transition period and some compensation for, the abolishing of your cartel. And more of them are coming to me and they said, Maxime, you're right about that. We are ready for that because also they want to export their products and they are not able to export their products because of that system and that
Mhm.
cartel. And a lot of them are very productive, they're efficient, and they're ready to export. So they're ready, or some of them are ready to get rid of that cartel. And I'm telling people in both, the choice is simple. You want to lose all these jobs in the manufacturing industry in both to protect that cartel, or you want to have a deal with the US and putting everything on the table. And like that, the manufacturing industry in both will be able to export to the US without tariffs. And the dairy producers will have a compensation to be able to reinvest and being more productive. And after that, being able to export their products. So I'm speaking about that, and more people understand now in both that it will be in the best interest of consumers, both people in both, and the industry to have that global deal with Trump and putting the supply management system, the cartel on the table.
And for those who don't, a person from Beauce is a Beauceron, like a person from Michigan is a Michigander. This will be. We'll end up. We'll wind up on this one, Maxim. But Chinese, Indian, foreign influence in Canada has been a very, very big question. I want names. Does anybody know the names? Like, I don't want to get you in trouble, but I want to know who these MPs are that have been wittingly, either unwittingly or wittingly, turned agents. What is the extent of the infiltration? What's the extent of what they're referring to as the foreign influence? And who are the parties that are involved? Because from what I understand, it's not just liberals. It might be conservatives, maybe not as much, but just as well, which might be why they don't want to look into it.
Yeah, you have a point there. The RCMP and our secret services said it. We have, members of parliament who are not loyal to our country. And so that's important. And actually, the secret services did ask Poliev, I can give you a briefing. I can give you the name of the MPs in your political party who are, not working in the best interest of our country. And Poliev said no, he doesn't want to know the names. I want to know the names. And Trudeau, no, he knows the name, but he doesn't want to give us the give us who they are. So all that must be public. Poliev must be out there and having that briefing and telling us who are these MPs. It's basic in a democracy. We need to know that if you're not working for your country and you're working for your country of origin against us Canadians, we must know. And like you, I want the names, and it's a secret, and it's in both. Liberals and conservatives don't want to have a discussion about that because they have MPs in their political parties that are, not loyal to Canadians.
But it's like there's no rumors internally. Like everybody knows who the person is, but they can't say it because they don't have the evidence. I'm thinking of a Harvey Weinstein type rumor. Everybody knows and everybody makes jokes about it, but nobody's even making jokes about the names as to who these members of parliament are potentially.
Yeah, but David, I'm not in Ottawa right now, so I cannot listen or understand or hear these rumors. I'm in Montreal. I'm traveling across the country,
Damn,
but
you got
maybe some
you got to get
insider in Ottawa, maybe they know.
you got to get into parliament so that you can have parliamentary immunity I'm joking, but no, if I had to guess, one name I would go with Mendocino right now, because the man who ignores the warnings is either wittingly or unwittingly aiding and abetting it. But that's my own personal opinion, Maxime, and I do not ask you to agree or disagree with it. Maxime, it's been fantastic. We should hopefully we'll be able to see each other, face to face sooner than later. I don't know when I'm coming back up to Canada, but
I will have to come back to Florida.
it is. Look, it's going to get too hot very quickly, but it's a beautiful place. Maxime, I'll put all your links out here, but where can people find you if they want to support what you're doing?
Yeah, they can go on our website, peoplespartyofcanada.ca, and they can click on platform. Our electoral platform is there. Read it. If you're a Canadian and you like it, I hope that you'll vote for us. And if you're a Canadian and you don't like what I'm saying and you don't like our platform, please don't vote for us, because I want change and we want tender. That's the way we are doing politics. I want people who believe in our platform, and if you believe, vote for us. And so if you want to donate to us also, you need to be a Canadian citizen. You can go on our website, peoplespartyofcanada.ca, click on the link donation, but they can follow me on Twitter, Maxime Bernier on Twitter, and on social media, peoplespartyofcanada.ca.
Amazing. Maxime, thank you very much. Stick around. We'll say our proper goodbyes. Everyone watching, thank you for being here. Be sure to tune in for the next episode, and peace out, peeps. Booyah.
Bye-bye.